Hi there, in this video we would like to compare some game design details with a real-life experience for the CASHFLOW 101 board game, primarily for two reasons. First, if you are still debating whether this game is suitable for you or not, and if you read comments online, you will see many people loving the game, while some people complaining that the game is oversimplified or does not represent reality. So by doing some comparison in this video, we hope to show you how things would actually differ, and you can determine by yourself whether the game is for you or not. Second, a game is, after all, a game. It has its limitations. If you are already enjoying this board game, note that becoming a master player in this game does not guarantee that you will succeed in the same way in real life, because in real life investments, you will have to consider a lot more details that the game is unable to cover. In this video, we will try to call out the primary details so that you can have the right mindset when handling the game transactions versus the real-life investments. There are also quite a lot of concepts that the game did not cover, and we will also try to give a brief overview on some of such concepts. Now let me start with some simple disclaimers. Finance is a complicated topic, and each subtopic is worth a full-length class or more. So we are definitely not able to cover all those details in such a short video time, and what we will try to do here is to call out some details that are more common and primary in real life. Before you actually participate in any real major financial activities, make sure to read more materials about the specific concept to better understand it. I know nowadays many people like to watch short videos instead of longer ones, or prefer platforms that gamify things as it is more fun, but trust me, financial activities are complicated, and those short videos or TikTok videos can probably give you a quick start by introducing the concept to you, but they cannot tell you the details simply because it is not possible to cover within that short time frame. Even in this video, as we will cover many topics, it is also impossible to have a thorough discussion. To do well in financial activities, you really need to spend some time. Second, laws constantly change, and the economic situations constantly change. So what we talk about here can get outdated in the future. And our discussion is primarily based on the US, so it may not all apply to other countries. But if you do your own readings as we mentioned above before you participate in a real new financial activity, you should be able to identify the changes and continue to do well. Now let's start. We will divide the topics into three main areas: overall concepts, stock markets, and real estate markets. We won't talk about some very obvious differences due to the game design limitations, like when you can have a baby or how often that can happen, but we will focus on the ones that really matter to our financial health. Okay, to start with, the most obvious and most important topic in any financial activities is, well, no, it is not how much money you can make, but the risks of the activities. Every financial activity carries risks, although some have extremely low risk that one can usually ignore if the market still has a solid foundation, like putting money into a savings account to earn interest. In this game, it has done a pretty good job simulating many risks through all kinds of market events, in addition to the built-in randomness, which we will also touch base on when we go to specific topics. But still, in the end, a game is just a game. If you took a high risk and went bankrupt in the game, you simply laugh at it and restart the game, as if nothing happened. But in real life, you don't get that luxury to reset everything. The ability to reset is how you can utilize the game to practice and learn, but at the same time, you should always keep in mind that in reality, you have to be much more careful with the risks you are taking on. This is a concept that many people overlook, and it is also why many people end up losing money in real-life investments. So always pay attention to risk portfolios of whatever you participate in. A second important topic, which is related to risks, is emotions. In a game, your only risk is losing the game, so you can be very rational when making financial decisions. But in real life, your risk is a lot bigger as you cannot reset. So in certain situations, you can go emotional and potentially make bad moves. For example, many people buy stocks in the bull market and then sell them out of panic in the bear market. This often is driven by emotions, and as a result, people lose money by buying high and selling low. True that we always can be affected by emotions, but we hope you will remember to keep your emotions in check. Another major difference we observed in the game is about tax. Tax is a super complicated topic, especially in the US, so this game has to do a major simplification by combining tax into one single value in the profession card. It also did a good job by simulating the higher tax bracket for a higher salary. But this is still not real, because first, this number never changes in the game. Even if we say this is just a tax on the salary part that is never changing, as you become richer in the game with investments, your potential gross income also increases. Although capital gains generally do not push you into a higher tax bracket, that could make you no longer eligible for certain tax benefits. Second, there is no tax mentioned when you are selling your assets for a profit in the game, which is often not true. So if you go for financial activities, you should learn some basics of taxes first to avoid surprises in the next year when filing taxes. Especially when your investments scale up in real life, tax planning may become one of your best friends. The fourth item we want to cover here in this section is inflation. The game is a board game which has everything printed in physical cards, so it has no good way to simulate inflation. But inflation is real. Like at the moment of this video, the US is having an ongoing inflation of 8 to 9%. Inflation makes your wealth shrink, even though on paper the numbers may look bigger. One clear discrepancy from real life here is the certificate of deposits, also known as CDs. In general, CDs offer a low return at a low risk, which usually cannot beat inflation. Therefore, although in this game CDs give you some solid wealth growth, in real life, CDs often are just a way to lower your overall financial risk. And you do need such in your overall portfolio, but usually it cannot bring you an increase in wealth when inflation is accounted for. The last is about your liabilities. In this game, you are encouraged to pay off liabilities to reduce your expenses and gain financial freedom, which is excellent advice. However, you can only pay off the entire liability all at once, mainly for game simplicity, because it is otherwise tedious to calculate the new expense if you only pay off part of it. But in reality, you can often pay off part of the liability first, which allows you to save interest early on. So in real life, especially for debts that have a high interest rate like credit cards, don't wait. So these are 5 primary overall differences that we should all keep an eye on when enjoying the games. They apply to every financial activity that we participate in. Now let's dive deeper into the detailed financial segments and start with the stock markets. For stock markets, we will not repeat what we discussed in the previous section, like your mindset and emotions during a market sell of panic, or during a bull market where the stock prices carry a significant amount of bubble. But we will talk more about the risks from the stock market's specific behaviors. First, in this game, for every stock, there is a current price and a price range. The current price occasionally may go outside the price range, but most likely it stays within. So how to play it right? Well, just buy it when the price is low and sell it when it is high. That is one major point why some people claim it to be too easy, because you just have to dump all your cash into one stock when it is low and wait until it goes to a higher price and you sell it all. Repeat a few iterations and you have a huge pile of cash. This is not practical in real life because a stock in reality may never go back to its previous high after the price dropped. But in this game, it is guaranteed that the card with a higher price will come after some time. So they consider it a major flaw in the game design. Well, in my opinion, I would like to discuss this from a few aspects. First, I have to say the game has already made its best effort as a board game to tackle this issue. If you look into the card decks, aside from normal stock price changes, you can also find a few cards about stock split and stock reverse split. A stock split means your shares will be split into smaller shares with a lower share price each. For example, 10 shares at $30 each will become 30 shares at $10 each after 3-for-1 split. A reverse split is just the opposite. So how does that help with the game design? Let's say you bought a stock at $15 and its price range is 10 to 30. 15 sounds a very good low price to buy, and you can dump all your cash into it and just need to wait for the card carrying a price of 30 to sell. But what happens if you then hit a stock reverse split for 1-for-3 first? Your share prices will jump to 45 each, but the deal's card will still only have a price range of 10 to 30. So you will lose money when you sell. This is a pretty good design to introduce such randomness into the system under the constraints of a board game, as it still finds ways to warn you that the risk is still everywhere. Then I also have to acknowledge that this is indeed still a limitation of a board game, because the issue is not fully mitigated. After all, there are too few stock split or reverse split cards, and furthermore, you may be able to identify the chance of hitting a reverse split card before a high price card simply by knowing which cards are in the remaining deck. So there are still ways to game the system and get wins easily by doing such tricks. But in my opinion, the primary purpose of playing this game is to gain some basic financial education and practice, instead of trying to really win a game. For the latter, you are probably better off with a different board game. If we keep our goal towards gaining more financial practice, even if we know the tricks, we can simply choose not to abuse it, or even set up an internal rule with a purchase limit to fix it by ourselves, so that we can keep the fun, keep the competition, and keep the practice. But are there stocks that can give some more reliable price range so that we can actually apply our buy low, sell high strategies with a lower risk in real life? Well, risks always exist, but there are products that can significantly lower the risk and offer a relatively more reliable performance. That is mutual funds. A mutual fund is essentially a blend of multiple stocks, so the performance is not highly impacted by any one stock. And if company A beats company B, as long as A and B are both in that fund, the fund would not suffer much from B's loss, as it gets A's gain. In this way, as long as the market is still healthy, the fund price will eventually grow. But there are a few things to call out here. One is that in this game, it only included very few mutual funds, with a zero yield due to no dividend. But in real life, mutual funds have management cost, so it essentially can have a slightly negative yield if its price does not grow. Of course, many mutual funds in real life have some dividend, but the expense ratio is still something you need to pay attention to. Two is that in this game, what it did not teach you is about the concept of passive index funds. Mutual funds are often actively managed by someone, so the expense ratio is usually high. But index funds are a type of mutual fund with a portfolio constructed to match or track the components of a financial market index, such as S&P 500. What's good about index funds? First, it's much more diversified and therefore has much lower risk. We often say not to put eggs into one basket, and that is why we have mutual funds. But if the mutual funds are highly focused on one volatile market, it is like having multiple baskets of eggs placed on one single falling table. Index funds, on the other hand, track a much broader market, so are less volatile. The second good thing is that its expense ratio is very low, as it does not require active management. So any downsides with index funds? Sure. First is while it lowers risk, its price is more stable and won't offer much opportunity if you want to win big quickly by speculating. Second, it might offer a false sense of security by tracking the broader market, but when the entire market is not doing well, like in a bear market, even index funds can go down. Although historical data shows that the US index has generally been going up as long as you did not sell it at those recessions out of panic, as the US economy has been holding a solid foundation. So what may be a good way to invest in index funds? Well, there are different strategies and series, and I will introduce one popular strategy here, which the game did not teach you either. It is called dollar cost averaging. The concept is that every month when you get your paycheck, you take out a fixed amount and buy the same index fund, regardless of market performance. And you don't sell during the process until you retire. In this way, it keeps you open to opportunities all the time while lowering stress levels significantly. Let's look at this example. In this example, the market went through some up and downs and eventually returned to its average. But with dollar cost averaging, when it was up, you bought fewer shares, and when it was down, you bought more shares. Although the final stock price average did not change, look at your actual average cost. It's lower. So you're already gaining a profit through this cycle, not to mention if the price goes higher later on. And this matches very well with the index fund performance in US history. But the other beauty of this practice is that it does not require you to put in a large amount of cash upfront, and it helps you to develop a good investing habit. As long as the foundation of the market is still solid, timing the market does not really matter in this practice, but time in the market is what eventually matters. Now we talked about time in the market. Let me emphasize on a topic that we mentioned earlier again, taxes. The game did not touch taxes on stock sales, but in real life we should always know how taxes play a part. There are two critical time topics to cover here. One is the holding period. When you sell your stock, if you have held it for long enough, usually at least a year, your gain is considered long-term capital gain. Otherwise, it is short-term capital gain. Long-term capital gain tax rates are generally much lower than your ordinary income, but short-term capital gain is taxed at the same rate as your ordinary income. That can be a significant amount of difference. So if you are planning a sale, check your holding period. The other is about wash sales. If you sell your stock and get a loss, you can use it to offset your gain on another transaction so that you are only taxed on your net gain across all your stock investments. But if you trigger a so-called wash sale, which means within the 30 days before and after your sale, you bought the same stock again, you will not be able to claim that loss of the sale immediately, but have to defer it onto your newly purchased lot and claim the loss when you sell that new lot. If you trigger the wash sale again on selling the new lot, it's deferred again. So the loss is not lost, but deferred. Does not sound too bad, right? But if you had poor planning, it can be bad. There was a media report mentioning a Robinhood user who got $45,000 total gain in 2020, but was facing a potential $800,000 tax bill due to wash sale and no tax planning. So it may not be too bad for most people, but it may bite hard if you don't know about it. One last thing about stock is leverage, which means you borrow money to invest in stocks. In this game, you can do so by taking a loan to buy stocks. In real life, it is usually done by margins. So what is similar? In both cases, you are borrowing more money so that you can buy more than what you have in cash. And how about differences? First, in this game, you can borrow whatever amount you want as long as you can afford the interest, without any collateral. But in reality, with margins, there are more restrictions on how much you can borrow, and your stock purchases will be used as collateral to the lender. Second, in real life, as your stock purchases become a collateral to the lender, If you hit a black swan event and the stock price drops significantly, even if you believe it is just transient, the lender may issue a margin call and force you to either sell the stocks at that low point or add more cash into your holdings so that the lenders can keep their risks under control. This significantly increases risks for you in real life compared to in the game, because it makes it very difficult to maintain your holdings during market downturns, and may force you to sell your investment at a low price point and lose your money. So if you want to use leverages on stock purchases in real life, be very careful. Now let's dig into real estates. In this game, each real estate investment is simplified into a summary table. Cost, down payment, mortgage, and cash flow. Where is the mortgage payment or insurance cost? They are combined into cash flow, which is simply rent minus all expenses. So now let's look at the comparison, focusing on the four aspects respectively. Down payment. This game simply assumes a 20% down payment, which is a good reference value. It is the usual percentage requirement to avoid extra mortgage insurance. But two things to note. 1. You can always go for a different percentage in real life, depending on your personal financial preferences. The more down payment you put in, the lower leverage you carry, the less monthly payment it takes, the lower risk it is, and it is more likely your cash flow goes positive. Second, the numbers here do not reflect the closing cost, which is often a few $1,000s. This is not a small number, so in real life, don't forget that budget. Of course, there are cases where you can negotiate to make the closing cost part of your mortgage too, but it is not always available. Mortgage. This topic is big. We will go in several aspects. 1. In this game, you make constant monthly payments, but your liability never goes down. This is of course not real, because part of your payments should go to your principal balance and bring down the liability number, unless it is an interest-only loan. The game made it that way because it's tricky to calculate the balance change, as the percentage that goes to the principal balance is actually different in each payment. The percentage is very low in the first few payments and grows gradually later on. However, this also tells us that if you don't hold your property very long before selling it, the game is also not too far off from reality, because during the first few years, most payments are for interest anyway, and the reduction in principal balance is not that much. 2. In this game, you are assumed to have constant mortgage payments. That is generally true if you have a fixed rate mortgage, but it is not true if you are on an adjustable rate mortgage, also known as ARM. ARM usually has a lower interest rate for the first few years compared to fixed rate mortgage, but after that the interest rate changes with the market, and your monthly payment changes too. In this game, there are market event cards that will force a foreclosure with an interest rate hike, and that kind of event is more likely to happen in real life if you are on ARM. 3. In this game, you can always get a mortgage when investing in a real estate property. However, in real life, applying for a mortgage is not that simple, or you may hit with a high interest rate that will kill the deal. A few factors here. First is your credit score. If you don't have a good credit score, you may not get a mortgage or may hit a very high interest rate. In this game, building credit score is not part of the teaching, but you should always pay attention to it. During the game, there are also events of foreclosure. The banks take your house away and you no longer carry that liability. And the next turn, you can buy another investment property again. But in real life, foreclosure is no small thing. If you hit a foreclosure, it will get onto your credit report, and it is a big red flag to lenders. So if you are at risk of a foreclosure, you should at least be aware of its consequences and try to avoid it. 2 is debt-to-income ratio, or say DTI. If your overall debt payment is a significant portion of your total income, it may become a warning signal to lenders. Of course, the income is not limited to your salary, and your rental income from investment properties may also count. But when you have more and more investment properties, you will have to carefully keep an eye on this ratio. Third is the property condition. Most properties are probably fine, but if it's a property of poor conditions, banks may not be willing to offer a mortgage because the property is not good enough as a collateral. So don't always assume you can get a mortgage when you're going for poor condition properties for house flipping. Fourth is mortgage limits. In this game, you can get unlimited house mortgages at any amount. But in real life, there is both a limit on how many conventional mortgages you can hold and on how many conforming loan amounts you can borrow. These numbers keep changing and usually won't impact regular home buyers, but when you become a real estate investor, you will have to know these limits well. Of course, there are still other ways to get a mortgage, like a commercial loan, but the rates usually are higher with different loan term details. Okay, now we talk about cash flow. In this game, this is a simplified number to combine all income and expenses, which in my opinion is a pretty good approximation. 3 notes here as a comparison to real life. 1. This value does not change in the game. This is an okay approximation because although in real life the rents would keep rising, the expenses will also keep rising due to increased property taxes, insurance premiums, and simply inflation. The two do not always grow at the same speed, so in real life the cash flow definitely may go up and down over time. But for the game's purpose, it's good enough, especially if you are not expecting to hold the property for long. 2. Most properties in this game offer a positive cash flow with a 20% down payment. This may no longer be true in today's real estate market, where the prices may have increased a lot, but the rents have not caught up. There could be corrections to the market in the near future, but generally do not blindly assume positive cash flow, and you should always do your own calculations before investing. 3. For land, the game assumes zero cash flow because it cannot generate rent income. However, in real life, the cash flow is usually negative because you have property taxes to pay. Some people were able to generate income by turning it into a hay farm, etc., but most lands do not create income to offset the tax. So that is a difference you have to watch out for. Last but not least, cost. Well, there's not much to say about the cost of the property as that is just the sales price. But when you later sell your property, you have to watch out for 2 extra expenses that would eat into your gain. One is tax, again. Similar to stocks, you have to know how tax works in real estate. Primarily, it is capital gain tax, but for rental properties, you also have to keep track of depreciation recapture. For primary residence, you may qualify for some tax deductions. And for all properties, you may have ways like 1031 exchange to defer taxes. But these are all professional topics that you should plan ahead and get professional help if needed. 2 is the agent commission cost. Unless you are having an off-market sale directly between you and the buyer, there usually are buyer and seller's agents involved in the process. Upon closing, the agents would charge you commission equal to a few % of the sales price. That is not a small amount, so when you calculate your financial returns before you determine whether to invest in a property, have that part considered too. Okay, now we conclude our comparisons between the board game CASHFLOW 101 and real life. This is definitely not a thorough discussion because financial investments are really complicated in real life, but we try to call out the more common and impactful aspects for you, and hopefully that would help you get more understanding on the game, how to play the game, and how to associate the game with real life, and apply your learnings appropriately into your real life. If you think the game is for you, have fun with it. We have an Android helper app on Google Play that can take away the hand calculations for you and also free you from the paper balance sheets. So if you want to make use of that, try it out. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave a comment. and thank you for watching.